Hello, and welcome to this edition of People in Transition. I'm your host, Bob Gerst. I've been hiring and mentoring executives, frontline employees, and job seekers for nearly 40 years through a host of transitions, some difficult, but most very good. This experience has given me a bird's eye view on a variety of trends, economies, industry disruptors, and transitions, big and small. It also brought me into contact with the thought leaders and decision makers you need to meet. Imagine knowing exactly what to do next and how to know it's time to make your big job change. We all know transitions can be scary, but it doesn't have to be. And it's even fun when you have actionable strategies and proven tactics to achieve the future you want. We'll share with you the tools and skills that can take your dreams to your next great job. So if change is on your horizon, you won't want to miss this discussion. Also, please subscribe to this podcast so you won't miss any future episodes. Kim LoCascio, I am so excited about our talking today. I've been looking forward to this ever since we first met.
Myself as well, Bob. Thanks for having me today.
Kim, one of my signature questions that my listeners are always interested in is, if you go back when you were a child, what was it that you wanted to be when you grew up?
Good question. So I wanted to be a veterinarian. I have always had a love of animals, and I thought that that's what I would do. I even had business cards drawn up. I still have one. I think when I was 7 years old, I had a business card made saying I was a veterinarian. However, then I realized that I would not want to see animals in pain, so I realized I could not do that.
And Kim, what were the transition moments that you went through from seeing yourself as a young child as a veterinarian to where you're actually at today?
So life is full of transitions, right, Bob? I started at that young age thinking I wanted to be a veterinarian, realized that since I didn't want to see animals in pain or with blood, that was not a good idea. And then really didn't think too much about it throughout my school age days until it was time to go to college. So I went from school to attending the University of Central Florida in Orlando. Thought that I wanted to be in broadcasting, do television. So I always thought you work more than anything else in life, so you should do something that's fun. And therefore, I thought broadcasting would be fun. Entertainment TV would be a lot of fun. So I decided to go that route. Started off learning how to film, how to edit. You really have to start out in a news capacity. So that was my plan. Went through school for communications, made resume tapes, sent them out over the country. And as I was doing so, realized that really wasn't what I wanted to be doing. So with that said, I had needed to work in the meantime. Got a job in sales. I was working at a large call center, obviously not a dream job by any means, but making ends meet. I was going ahead and doing that, moved into management, realized that certainly wasn't what I wanted to be doing. However, neither was broadcasting, really. I think that when I was in school, I thought it would be fun and just realized it wasn't my dream. So not really sure what I wanted to do. However, really happy that I had taken the time to go ahead and invest in going through college, learning the communication side of things. While I was in school, I minored in criminal justice just because I had a love of it, but I didn't want to be in school long enough to stick with law school. So from there, I started just going on interviews and actually ended up working for a radio station. So there was a transition from thinking I was going to be a veterinarian to thinking I wanted to be in broadcasting to being in sales to actually getting my first after-school career in radio. I did sales for them. It was a great way to learn, worked off of a draw, Went from there. I was there for a few years, and then I came across a job working for a publication company. They were owned by a large newspaper company out of Connecticut. However, myself being in Orlando, they had a tourism division. So I started selling tourism publications and ended up being a publisher, which is basically a sales manager for that organization. After being there for a few years, that newspaper was not doing so well, economic downturn, so big layoff, moment of transition, first time I had experienced a layoff in my life, which was, of course, challenging, as layoffs always are. So really was reevaluating what I wanted to do, was not sure. I started applying for a variety of positions. Ended up from there accepting a job for an online college, and I was going to be doing sales for them. Not my dream, but again, I could see some good long-term growth. I had accepted that position and got a call from a staffing agency, which is what I do now. And apparently when I was going through Career Builder does mark off a multitude of jobs it thinks you're a good fit for. I had missed unselecting one that I was not a fit for, which was a nurse. So my resume went to the staffing agency for a nursing position. They clearly saw that I was not a nurse. However, they thought I'd be a very good fit for their organization. They called me. I went in, worked for a day for free to see if it was a good fit. Ended up seeing a lot more longevity there. Turned down the other position I had already accepted the staffing agency position, and ended up being with that firm for 10 years. I recruited for a year, did sales, did management for them. And then I just had another moment of transition where I just was ready for a change. I believe the only constant in life is change, but a lot had changed within that organization as well. And it was just time for me to make a move. Found Higher Resources, which is the parent company of Sourceowls, where I am today. Ended up making the transition and going over there in a sales capacity. After being with them for a couple of years, came on as a partner in the firm and helped to form our platform Sourceowls about 4 years ago. And hence, here I am today.
Kim, you've personally gone through a number of transitions, both ones that you've designed as well as those that have been designed for you. Where do you see most people struggle when they are in transition?
I think a lot of people struggle with getting down on themselves. A lot of times transitions aren't something that you've made the decision, and even if you have, it's a very hard decision to make a lot of times. So I think people start to think the worst, start to get down on themselves, feel negative. And when you start to get into that rhythm, everything slows down, everything becomes a lot more challenging. I think it's so important to stay positive in moments of transition. If you chose that transition, you chose it for a reason and need to remember that. And there's always something better on the other side of that. If you weren't the one that made that choice, I really do believe things have a way of falling into place. If you're a hard worker and you keep doing what you've always done, they do always come full circle. So remembering that maybe that transition wasn't your choice, but again, there's a better fit on the other side. And if you stay positive and remember that, I really think it helps to get you there and get you there a lot faster.
Kind of a follow-up on that. What do you see as the role emotional intelligence plays in your job search process? And if you have strong emotional intelligence, how can you showcase that when you're talking with recruiters, HR people?
I think that having emotional intelligence is really important in your job search because you need to be able to think about everything logically, but also everybody's emotional. So you need to be able to tie into other people's emotions. You need to be able to control your own emotions. And I think being emotionally intelligent doesn't mean being even keeled. It doesn't mean not getting excited, or getting hurt. It just means knowing how to control those emotions, one, when you're going through that job search, and then when you are speaking with a recruiter or speaking with a hiring manager, understanding how to convey your emotions, but also how to appeal to their emotions. For example, if you're speaking to somebody who is a little bit louder, a little bit more outgoing, and you have that side of your personality, you want to utilize that when you're speaking to that recruiter or that hiring manager. You want to connect with them emotionally. If there's somebody that's a little bit more even keel or reserved, if you have that side of yourself as well, it doesn't mean being somebody who you're not, but it means you want to connect with that person the best that you possibly can. So not exactly mirroring them, but that side of your personality, showcasing it when you're speaking with them.
And Kim, when you start looking for your next great opportunity, you should probably do some reflection in terms of what type of company you're looking for, what size, what industry, maybe even what role that you might want to play. How do you go about doing that reflection? And then once you answer that, how do you go about doing research on those companies, on those roles to help you target your search?
Good question. So I think as far as reflection goes, when you're looking inside of yourself at what you want to do next, we need to shoot for the stars, but also be realistic. So what have you done in your past, and where will that translate really well to? For example, my background has been sales. I should not decide that I'm going to go and be a doctor next because I don't have the experience. It's not going to happen. So I see a lot of times people decide, I want to do something completely different that has nothing to do with what I've done before. I don't have the skill set or the knowledge, and I'm just going to shoot in a whole different direction. That's just not realistic. Not to say that you can't make a change, but something that drastic. So I think when you're reflecting, you do want to be realistic. Look at what your experience is. Look at what you're good at. What did you like and not like about what you've done in the past? Not just in your last position, but if you've had other experiences in school, other careers, what were you really good at? What were you bad at? What did you enjoy? What did you not enjoy? And really reflect upon all of that to think about, what do I want to do next? Do I want to stay in the same field, or do I want to make a change? If I do want to change fields, where will my experience and my strengths still fit in with, even though I'm going to make a change? So really thinking about those things and taking time to do so. It's a lot of times not something that happens in 15 minutes. Some people know they want to stay in the same area. That's easier. But if you know you want to make a change, really reflecting upon where is the best fit for that change to be. From there, once you've made that decision, for instance, just as an example, myself, at the time when I left the agency I'd been with for 10 years, I reflected upon, do I want to stay in the recruitment world? I wasn't sure. I started exploring various healthcare organizations because I did healthcare recruitment and was exploring just doing sales for those organizations. So making a change, but something where my experience still lied within. That's what I was exploring. Then, of course, I came across a different type of recruitment agency and decided to stay in the same area, but I wasn't sure if I wanted to. So that type of reflection. Then you need to research. So research various companies. Look at reviews on those companies. Look at the types of roles. Look at the longevity of other people in the organization. You can learn a lot. I mean, Google nowadays, there's everything out there. Now, take everything with a grain of salt also. A lot of people, as we all know, are very happy to give bad reviews, but not good reviews. And we're all guilty of that in some aspect. I know myself, something horrible happens, you think to go right back to your desk and write about it. You have the best experience ever. You say you're going to write about it, and 2 weeks later, you forgot to do it. So take those things with a grain of salt, but also do your due diligence. And then research the person that you're going to be interviewing with if you do get an interview. Know some things about them, know things about the company, know things about the job that you can reference. And remember, most importantly, when you're going on that interview, if you do get that interview scheduled, remember that it is just as much a time for you to interview that person and that company to make sure this is a good fit for you as it is about them interviewing you. And it's a lot more of a comfortable conversation. And also, I think that it really helps put things in perspective that you have options as well, and you need to make sure it's a good long-term fit.
Kim, how does fear impact your job search? Where does that fear, do you think, come from? And if you have it, what can you do about it?
I think that everybody has a little bit of fear when it's time to search for a job, whether they're currently employed and are starting that search or they no longer are. I think if you no longer are, your fear may be heightened. But fear is a normal emotion that I think we all have to remember. It's normal. It would be strange if we were making a career change and not feeling some bit of fear. And I think it comes from change. Change can be scary to, I believe the only constant is change, but I still know that it can be scary making a change. You're meeting new people, potentially. You're starting all the way at the bottom when maybe you've been someplace for 5 or 10 years. You have the fear of loss of income. You have the fear of how is this going to affect my family? Am I going to like it as much as I liked the last career? Is it going to be worse? Is it going to be better? There's so many different things that can happen that fear is just a very normal emotion when you're making that change. Now, how to control that? I think that for most people, the best thing that you can do is, number one, remember that it's normal to be feeling that way and that it's okay to be feeling that way. But then also think, what happens if I make this change and it's not the best thing in the world? What's the worst thing that can really happen? And a lot of times when you put it in that perspective, you realize it's not as scary. What's the worst thing that can happen? Well, I end up making a little bit less and I have to go back to the job board, or it ends up not being all it's cracked up to be and I have to look again. What's the best that could happen? It ends up being an amazing experience where I learn a ton and I'm there for the next 10 years, or I learn a ton and I take that to grow into another role. A lot of times the risk versus reward conversation in your head ends up being that there's a lot greater of rewards. And if the worst does happen, it's not the end of the world. It's just another avenue, another direction, another transition.
Kim, let's switch gears for just a moment and talk just a bit about networking. I think that networking is a crucial part of a career transition. How do you think an individual can strategically network to facilitate a smooth transition for themselves?
Networking is really important. And I think that we saw such a shift in that when COVID came about, because networking used to be going out and attending various events face to face, and it is getting back to that again. However, there was that, again, period of transition, which is inevitable. And I think a lot of people during that whole COVID shift were forced to find new ways of networking. And so now, in today's world, we see the old way of the face-to-face, and we also see that there's so many other ways of networking. There's LinkedIn groups, there's Facebook groups, then there's going out in person, there's using your past relationships. I think that people too often forget that the past that you have is a good thing. Think about all of those people you've met along the way. They may not be able to get you a job, but they might be able to give you some good insight. If you're not sure what you want to do next, think about people that you've met along the way who seem really happy in their careers. Take the time to ask them what they're doing. How did they get there? How did they make their decisions? And let that help and guide you in making your decisions. Find a mentor, someone that you look up to, that you value where they're at, and learn about how they got there. And you can take those things and help you in your own course and your own search as well. So I think Networking with people you've met in the past, networking with people you've worked with in the past, networking with friends and family. And then in addition, go and attend some events. If that's a sweet spot for you and you love it, great. If it's something that you don't love, try to get out of your comfort zone. A lot of times getting out of your comfort zone can be one of the best things for you. You learn things you would have never learned otherwise. And then go ahead, join LinkedIn groups, join Facebook groups. There is a wealth of information that we never used to have before that you can learn from people in those groups. And a lot of times it's a very comfortable way for people as well. And it does take less time. You can network with a lot more people when you're doing so online. And since we have that ability nowadays, it's something we should really take to our advantage and use that in finding your next career home.
Kim, you've looked at hundreds, if not thousands, of resumes in your career. What's a good resume layout, and how can I get my resume to stand out in the crowd?
Great question. So yes, I have looked at thousands and maybe hundreds of thousands of resumes throughout the years. I think that one thing that has gone away for the most part, there are certain roles, however, a cover letter. No one takes the time to read it. So spending the time to invest in writing that cover letter, my recommendation is not to do it. A manager has a stack of resumes a lot of times, and they may have 50 resumes in front of them. They are not going to read that cover letter. A recruitment firm, that recruiter has a lot of resumes coming in as well. You don't need that. What you need is the relevant experience. What you need to remember when writing your resume is that one size does not fit all. So if you're applying to a variety of positions, tailor your resume for that position. What I mean is not to add information, but if you're applying for a sales manager role at a recruitment firm or with a healthcare company, what they may need to see for your experience and what they're looking for may be different. So let's say you look at the job description for both of those roles and you see that the 5 core things they're looking for are different. And you have the experience for both jobs. They don't both need to see all 10 things. So just put in your relevant experience. Now, don't copy and paste what they say that they need, but take your relevant experience that matches what they need and make sure those things are in the resume. So tailor your specific resume for the job that you're applying for based on your experience that correlates in that situation. Also, if it's requiring specific software, or if there's pluses that are not required and you have that experience, highlight those things. There is nothing wrong with highlighting or bolding on a resume. Also, really try to keep your resume to 1 page. If you have to go to 2 pages, it's acceptable. However, most of the time, after 1 page is not going to get viewed. Go ahead and put your most relevant experience on the top of the resume. That is where everyone is going to look first. If you have something, let's say you went through your last 2-3 jobs and it's 1 page and you have experience outside of that, you can always put something on the bottom that they can request more information. Most people don't. They don't care that far back. They don't need to know every single thing you did in school. They just need to see the relevant experience. And if you had transitions in the last few years, make sure you have that on there. Also, if you've had transition and let's say you weren't at one job for 10 years, the last for 3 years, you don't have the best of job stability. Put a little parenthesis next to that and try to disclose the reason. For example, if it was a layoff, if there was a shutdown due to COVID, something like that, I would put that there to try to get that out of the way and have them still schedule that interview despite seeing that you may have had a short stint somewhere. But always include that, because if you leave it off, that usually comes back to bite you. And I see people do that a little too often.
Do you think that hiring managers react differently today when they see a layoff potential in your resume? And you gave one suggestion about how to communicate that on the resume. Are there any other suggestions that you have in terms of dealing with what has been in the last 5-8 years a pretty volatile market?
Definitely. I think that in today's world, it is a little bit easier to get over that hurdle because there were so many people that went through it themselves. So when they see that, I think in the past, for example, my first probably 5-7 years in the recruitment world, people would put layoff no matter what happened in their career just because it was an easy out. And managers and recruiters saw that and knew it was 50-50, maybe true, maybe not. Kind of went into that with a grain of salt, would sometimes pass over those resumes because it was just easier not to have to deal with that and ask that question. Now I think because so many people have seen it, been through it, they are more open to it. However, what they still don't want to see is that prior to this whole shift that you have layoff, short job stint, just shows that you're a job hopper. Now, if you had good job stability and then all of a sudden you don't, they're going to understand that. So I think that being honest is one very important thing. And also, like I said, yes, notating that. Now, once you get the call for the interview, don't be afraid to give a little bit of information. Now, don't give too much information. I see that someone gets asked, why did you leave that role, or why did they downsize? And somebody goes into every poor organizational thing that happened there, why the manager wasn't good, why the department failed. That person does not need to know all of that. They don't care about all of that. And you never want to say something bad about someplace you worked before, even if it was the worst place in the world. You never want to say something bad. It's a very small world. You never want to say something bad about a person, an organization. So keep it short and sweet, but give enough information that you're not hiding anything. The organization started having fall off due to COVID. Things had slowed down. Unfortunately, they laid off 150 people. Give them the information they need without sharing too much. I think that really helps as well, but don't be afraid to give that information.
Kim, many interviews today start with a phone screening or maybe a Zoom screening. Any tips, techniques that you'd like to share to help the candidate have a more successful phone or Zoom screening?
Yes, I think number one, remember that it is a real interview. Sometimes we see people, if it is a Zoom, they just got out of the gym and they run back to their computer and they're not in their best presentable self. If somebody can see you, it is a real interview, whether you're meeting with a hiring manager, an HR manager, a recruiter, that person is still getting their first impression. You want to be very presentable, well put together. Make sure you did your research. Don't just wait to research until you get an on-site interview. This is prepping you to get that on-site interview. So you want to have already researched the company, researched the job, know why you want to interview for that job, why you feel like you're a good fit, have questions about what their expectations are, have questions about why the role is open. Do that research, make sure you're presentable, make sure you're prepared for that interview. Now, if it's phone versus Zoom, same things apply. No, you definitely could have come straight from the gym, no problem there, but still make sure that you're treating it just like you would any other interview. First impressions are so important. You really want to connect with that person again. Make sure if that you know who you're interviewing with, you've done your research on what their title is, how long they've been with the company. Having those things also helps you to have a good conversation. A lot of times, I think it's really important if you're talking to somebody who's been with an organization for 10 years, ask them, why have you been with this organization for 10 years? I'd love to be with an organization for 10 years. What are some of the great things about working here? If they're new, ask them what made them make that switch. People like to talk about themselves. It's just a normal human trait. So asking about the position in the company, very important, but find some things that you can ask about them as it ties to the role that you're applying for as well.
And kind of piggybacking on what you said, especially if you're doing a phone interview, your voice tone, your energy, your passion plays a role. And I think that's something that people sometimes struggle with. What's your thoughts on that?
I agree. I think that when people are in a phone interview, sometimes they're distracted. There's a lot of other things going on around them. whether they have kids playing in the background, there's a TV on, whatever it might be, they're not giving it 110% because they're distracted and they're not used to going on phone interviews. A lot of people who are interviewing don't interview as a second career, which is a good thing. However, make sure that you go to a quiet location. You're focused. You have a paper, you have a pen, you have your questions written down, just as if you were to walk into that office and you are looking at that person in the eyes, in person. You want to have that same feeling. So really make sure that you've given it the time it deserves, you've gone to a quiet location, and that if you're excited about this role, make sure that person hears that in your voice. If it's something you're not excited about, then probably not the right fit and move on. But you want to make sure that they can also get your personality out of it. I hear a lot of times when somebody interviews someone, I just didn't think they'd be a good fit. Well, what I ask is why? Why would they not be a good fit? On paper, they looked perfect. And usually it's, well, they were just kind of blah, or they didn't answer the questions I asked. So be lively, don't be over the top, but if you're excited about the position, let them feel that. Also, listen to what they ask. Stop, listen, and then respond. And if you don't know an answer, be honest. Let them know, I don't know that, this is why, I need to think a little bit more about that, or here's what I did do. I didn't do that piece of the pie and here's why, but I do think I could learn that and here's why. So make sure to listen to the full question and give full answers. And if you don't have something, don't try to make it up. Just be honest in that. A lot of people know you're not going to have everything on their checklist. But if you don't, they want to hear an open and real response as to why and why you still feel like it would be a good opportunity for you.
Kim, any books or other resources that you would recommend to someone who's in transition?
So I have read a few different books, and I'm going to be completely honest and transparent that there hasn't been one recently that I would really recommend. However, I will say that you can go ahead and check out Sourceowls.com, which is our website. It does give a wealth of information as a job seeker, tips and tricks in securing that interview. I also would say go on to LinkedIn and become a member of various groups. We talked about networking earlier. Whatever industry it is, whether it's biotech, whether it's accounting and finance, join different groups. And there's a wealth of information that you can find in those groups that will help you in that moment of transition and career search.
Kim, we've gone through so much information in this 30 plus minutes. If you were to coach someone, if nothing else, remember these three things to help you find your next great job easier and faster. What are those three things that you would tell them to remember?
Number one, stay positive. So important is to keep your head up when you're going through these times of transition. Number two, remember to do your research. If you're in a moment of transition, whether it's chosen or not chosen, you need to research and make sure you're finding what's right for you, not that you're just jumping into something because you're in a period of transition. So stay positive, do your research, and remember that transition is a necessary and natural part of life. It is how we get to that next point that many times is the best point. So stay positive, research, and remember transition is necessary and natural.
Kim, I am sure anyone who has spoken with you in the past that has gone through their job transition picks up on your positive energy and understands that you get it when you're talking about transitions. And you've helped so many today sharing your ideas. I want to thank you so much and look forward to our having the opportunity to talk again in the future.
Myself as well, Bob. It's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. We're working in unprecedented times. The purpose of these episodes is to give you the support and critical tools to adjust with the changing marketplace. I'll continue to introduce you to guests who have successfully survived their own obstacle course and can share useful information. If today's message was helpful to you, please share it on your social media. Your review and rating helps get this to more people. Also, if you have questions or podcast ideas for future conversations, reach out to me on LinkedIn. Change is constant. The more prepared you are for it, the better and easier the change will occur. Thank you again. This is your host, Bob Gerst. See you at our next episode.